Another international diplomatic effort to find a way towards peace in Syria is taking place in Geneva. The UN Special Envoy, Staffan de Mistura, is meeting officials from Russia, Iran and Turkey, and they're discussing the composition of a committee that will draft a new constitution for the country. Journalist Makki is here. Danny is also a commentator on the Syria conflict. You're Syrian yourself, which is worth pointing out, I suppose, Danny. But let's talk about the constitutional changes, the proposals that have been put forward. At the moment, there are simply two sides, with Bashar al-Assad not willing to have some of the modifications that would be needed for the opposition, at least, to be just somewhat happy. For example, at the moment, there's no restriction, is there, on how many terms a president can serve? And when we bear in mind that Bashar is the son of Hafiz, this is a family that's been in power for a long time. The constitutional change that is proposed about that would make it a two-term limit. It will give the parliament power to sack the president, that it would devolve some of the power from central government. Where's the solution going to come in terms of the constitution?
I mean, definitely, as it stands, it would be taking away what would be, presidential powers and giving them to parliament. And at the moment, definitely for the Syrian government, that's something which is unacceptable, as it seems as if it's kind of a foreign imposed agreement, if you like. Now, what you've got, the situation within the constitutional issues in Syria is you already have a parliament, but that parliament runs the country on a day-to-day basis, but the bigger decisions, the final decisions, are all presidential, and any solution in regards to the constitutional issue would have to take into account the supremacy of the presidency as the final and the authority within Syria in the near future. I mean, Assad has had, two presidential terms now, and he's still allowed a third up until 2021. Now, depending on whether this constitution brings another 2 terms in, for example, you could have a potential 14-year presidency further, above the 20 years which have already been given already. So there's a lot to think about, and there's a lot of concessions which you'd think the opposition and the states around Syria would have to make, as opposed to the Assad government itself.
Looking at the issue of the constitution almost seems to be looking forward to a time when there isn't war in the country. Is it too early to be talking about post-conflict Syria, given what's happening in Idlib right now?
No, absolutely. I mean, post-conflict is what we should be looking towards, not just as Syrians, but as everyone following the Syria crisis in general, because we've reached that phase now where we are approaching the final embers of the war, if you like. This Idlib operation, what happens after Idlib will essentially define what pathway this war is going to go into. So essentially, we can look to a future Syria, but what that future Syria is, the structure of it, how that's presented to the world is something which is going to be a subject for a lot of debate among Syrian opposition members, among government members, and upon all of the countries around Syria, mainly the Russians, the Americans, who would want to have a say in what the future of Syria would look like. You've got to know that reform has to be done in Syria. There has to be an element of different reforms which at least bring these different sides together on something in the future. Syria can't stay as it is. It's impossible. You've got to reconstruct the country. I mean, this is going to cost billions, and you're going to need one country. The refugees have to return. These are all factors which the Syrian government and Assad have to take into consideration in this future period. Obviously, this is after what's going to potentially happen in Idlib, which is either a successful military offensive or a rapprochement or an agreement between Turkey, Iran, Russia and the US, which finds a solution to these issues. After that, we can start genuinely looking towards a post-conflict situation and scenario in Syria.
Can you realistically see anybody stopping the Russians and the Syrians from retaking control of Idlib?
Well, at the moment, judging by the forces which are being massed, which has been unprecedented in the Syria war, and the momentum they currently have, it's hard to see anyone stopping them. If anyone can stop them, it's definitely Turkey. Turkey is the only actor within the region with the capabilities and the power and the strength to currently say, look, there's a line which we don't want you to cross. And I doubt that Assad and the Russians would cross that line and go to war with Turkey, for example. And that's the worst case scenario. At the moment, the US seems a bit disenchanted with the Idlib situation, unless per use of chemical weapons has been stated by Trump. Other states haven't really contributed. So it's a case of the Syrian opposition being as resourceful as possible with potential Turkish support. But I can see an effect where the Syrian army with Iranian and Russian support will take Idlib, but it will take a long time. Idlib's a very rough and tough area. It's not like Daraa, where it's flat land, there's mountainous areas, and we're approaching winter, which will make it a very hard fight. If Idlib is to fall, it's going to be a very prolonged battle over perhaps a number of years, not even months.
Right.
Definitely.
Danny Makki, really appreciate that analysis. Thanks for coming into the studio.